It is hard to believe that a week ago today, members of Congress had just cut a deal to raise the debt ceiling and slash $1 trillion worth of spending. Since then, the stock market has crashed, shedding more than 10% of its value. America's credit has been downgraded for the first time ever by Standard & Poor's. And Democrats and Republicans are now once again blaming one another for the downturn in the economy. So who is really to blame for the country's current fiscal woes? Well, that is a question we are putting to our insiders today, veterans of politics who join us each week. This week, we are joined from Washington by former Western New York Congressman Tom Reynolds. He is a Republican, and he served in the House for a decade before retiring at the end of his 5th term in 2008. And then back in Albany, I am joined by Bruce Jory. He's a former advisor to 2 Democratic governors, now a consultant at Corning Place Consulting, and an adjunct professor at UAlbany. Gentlemen, thanks very much for being here. It is good to see both of you.
Thanks for having us.
Okay.
Great to be here.
It is great to see you. Okay, so let us start with Bruce because he is here in Albany, so he gets the first attempt here. Bruce, the Dow up now, and of course everything's roses, and we can all go back to watching TV and eating French fries, right?
Wish it were so. It's not. We're in a problem that has a couple different levels. One, we now know we were in a much deeper recession than anybody projected at the time. This is back in 2008, 2009. As a result of that, now we know that any economic turmoil, whether it's an increase in gas prices, loss of supply from the Japanese tragedy over the nuclear reactor, gas prices, or the foreign credit crisis that's now hitting in Europe, we get hit harder than we thought. This recovery is very tenuous. It's borderline. Some economists think we're going into a double-dip recession. This is so significant that I think it's really time for both parties to start acting like incumbents worried about their election and putting the country's economic interest ahead of partisan advantage. That's where I think we are now.
Okay. Mr. Reynolds, your thoughts on where we are at the moment?
Well, you've got no question that we've got some bad indicators right now. Manufacturing is not clicking like it should be. We are seeing a slowness in retail sales. We have unemployment at 9.1%, and we have now this week seen a downgrade of our rating in the country by Standard & Poor's.
Right.
So we have both the country in a funk, and we have some economic indicators that continue to need attention. And Congress will have its hands full as they come back here in September.
Yeah, you know, let's talk about that Standard & Poor's downgrade. The president basically agreed with them, saying, yeah, this was about politics. It was not about numbers. There was that weird moment, Tom, where the White House was saying that there was this trillion some odd, $2 trillion math glitch, and this was based on was S&P wrong here?
Well, as you pointed out at the top of the show, I am in Washington, so I'm within the Beltway this week.
Inside
and
the bubble.
And it's clear that guns came out ablazing this week by the administration, where the president and the Treasury Secretary and others made it very clear that Standard & Poor's did not put together their document with correct information, and they cite a $2 trillion number factor that was incorrect. And in the draft on Friday, when Standard & Poor's brought that to the administration, many of the outlines of the draft they changed the order of.
Yeah.
And that has brought now both a robust rebuttal by the administration and the finger-pointing game going here by both parties.
Yeah. Do you think, Bruce, that
well,
they
as a
should
political
be?
science professor, I would give Standard & Poor's an A for, not a triple A, but an A for political analysis on the dysfunction, but probably a C- or even a D for their financial analysis. When you when you do creditworthiness, you're analyzing whether there will be default, whether the entity you're grading will pay back the debt. There seems little question on that. Standard & Poor's had their own problem. They gave Lehman Brothers, up until a week before their bankruptcy, an A rating, or had not downgraded their rating.
Right.
So Standard & Poor's has their problem. But having said that, let's look at the ramifications. The ramifications are when they downgrade. By the way, they predicted this the Thursday before.
Yep.
Their president, who was not a part of the rating...
Weeks before, actually.
And they
true.
reiterated it. Tom is as usual correct. And they said, look, having tried to get the grand bargain, if you fail, we're going to lower you. Now, the problem with that is state credit ratings are predicated on the federal credit rating.
Yeah.
Mortgages, credit card balances. Down the line, if we learned anything from this economic crisis, it is that they're interlocking, and interest rates are there.
Time out. Gentlemen, Standard & Poor's is not elected.
That's
Standard
correct.
& Poor's is a rating agency.
Right.
Okay? What business, to play devil's advocate, does a rating agency have playing politics with such very high stakes in this particular game?
It'll be interesting watching in Washington. The Senate Banking Committee is beginning to put together preliminary questions that leads many here in Washington to believe that the Senate Banks Committee will convene hearings to go through the process of what Standard & Poor's utilized for putting together their document.
Right.
In addition to that, most here believe that the interest rates and other things for consumers will not see an immediate impact based on this rating. But no president, no country wants to see a downgrading that Standard & Poor's put on this country, particularly when it's compared to the UK and France, both having balance sheets that are not stronger than the United States, and they still remain with AAA rating by Standard & Poor's. And it's also important to note that the other rating agencies still rate the United States the same as before the outcome of the debt ceiling vote.
I think Tom is 100% correct, and you know, given that what they passed last week called for that super committee to come up with recommendations, Standard & Poor's might have been a lot wiser and more prudent to await any change in the credit rating until they saw where that was.
Yep.
The other thing is but having said that, there is a torpor over Washington in terms of this, and just to put it in context, when Speaker Boehner walked away from the table on Friday, July 29th, it was over a difference between $400 billion on the revenue side. The President had asked for a $1.2 billion package. Apparently, Speaker Boehner, if reports are correct, was willing to go up as high as $800 billion. Now, for that $400 billion, their inability to compromise, we've now lost, in terms of the market, $3 trillion. Talk about grand bargains. That wasn't a grand bargain.
Okay,
Well,
so go ahead, Tom.
My old friend who was once enrolled in the Liberal Party wants to make it sound quite that easy, but that $800 billion was identified as potential revenue of closing loopholes. And what was the accusations that I saw here was that the administration moved the goalpost from 800 to 1.2 trillion, and therefore it became a deal breaker, because that would have been having to look at new taxes in addition to closing loopholes, and that was a deal breaker for the Republicans. What becomes important here, that's all history. Now we have to look at the super committee, which is now charged with 12 members, equal Republican and Democrat. By November 23rd, they have to produce a document that cuts $1.5 trillion out of the budget, that is then goes before both the House and the Senate with simple majorities to pass, and there are no rules to that. They can raise revenues, they can cut, however they get the agreement, and 7 votes of the super committee. The committees need to be named by the 4 leaders of the House and the Senate by August 16th. So when they go to work, if they get a result, it will provide an additional $2.4 trillion that would be the total cut out of the budget. 1.5 trillion now to the trillion that was done for the debt ceiling vote. And if they don't, it sets up an automatic trigger, and that trigger will cut $1.2 $2 trillion, half from the Pentagon and half from domestic spending.
Okay, let me just ask a question, politically speaking, regarding the 2012 election, because we're starting to see a lot of candidates rolling around out there, right? We're looking at the governor from Texas is coming into the mix now. I mean, I have seen Republicans quoted saying Obama's done because of this. If only we can get the right candidate. Do you agree with that statement? Either of you?
Mike Dillon, former appellate presiding judge in the 4th Department, used to say, you're never in trouble until you know who your opponent is. Right now, the Obama team is looking with what is reported today that they are going to put some attacks on Romney, assuming he is the front runner and the potential nominee. But the Republican Party has by far not finalized that. The president's problems are not just the debt ceiling, where his base is upset with him but likely to support him. He has problems with a 9.1% unemployment. No president in modern times has been reelected with unemployment higher than 7.8%. And so as he looks at getting ready for an election, he will have to run a scorched earth campaign against whoever he runs against, whether it's Romney or any one of the 10 that are vying for presidential sweepstakes.
This is one instance I'll disagree with my dear friend Tom Reynolds. The other thing is, just for point of fact, going back, the president didn't say that extra $400 billion was a deal breaker. He asked the speaker to get back to him, and the speaker then pulled away from the talk.
Okay,
but it is going forward.
No, Bruce, the fact I know I'm on a delay here. The question was, it became a deal breaker to John Boehner,
correct?
Not necessarily to the president.
That's correct. But while you pointed out,
when the president moved the goalpost, that was a deal breaker.
Well,
okay, move on, men. Move on.
Here's the problem: if the president takes the case to the American people on his idea on what to do with the Bush tax cuts going forward, if he takes a compelling case for reducing unemployment, the biggest mistake the president made, in my opinion, and I've been saying this for weeks, was to not recognize that he wasn't going to get significant action on revenue from the Republican Congress or the Republican House. What he should do was make a deal on a payroll tax extension and expansion to generate employment. Here's the problem both parties have, and this maybe Tom and I can get some consensus on. There's a big difference in politics between recognizing what you're elected to do, what people are really voting for you on, and what you want them to. Both parties have misinterpreted that message. The American people want, over 60%, want the priority to be on job development and job growth. Neither party, either the Democrats on health care or more recently on the deficit, neither party has done that.
Okay.
And that's why they lost Tom's district, because the Republicans got away from what people wanted.
Okay, good.
There we go. We got consensus.
It's good that you agree with him, because we're almost out of time. Now we can get back together. I just want, very quickly, your comments on that, Tom, because I don't think I have spoken to you since that district out there that Chris Lee is no longer there. We now have Kathy Hochul. What's your thought?
Well, there are enough residents in Western New York for 2 full congressional seats, or 3 partial, as it's done now. So I believe that Brian Higgins, Kathy Hochul, and Louise Slaughter have opportunities to have seats in Western New York from Rochester West. It'll depend on whether the Assembly and the Senate can get together and draw the lines, or whether they fail doing that and the courts draw the lines, what they'll look like.
Okay, well, we'll have you back to weigh in on the redistricting question, because I wanted to get to that, but we got so caught up with the fiscal questions that we ran out of time, unfortunately. Tom Reynolds, it's great to see you, and we hope to see you soon again also. And Bruce Story, thanks very much for being with us, as always.
Nice to be with you. Tom, take care. Always good to be with you.
Great to be with both of you.